Podcasting from beautiful Leesburg, Virginia. Welcome to the Music Educator podcast, bringing you tips, tricks, and practical advice that you can use tomorrow. Here's your host and fellow music educator, Bill Stevens.
Hello everyone, this is Bill Stevens with the Music Educator podcast. Today we're going to talk about 7 revealing beginner saxophonist problems. Learning a new instrument is not without its challenges. In this podcast episode, 7 revealing beginner saxophonist problems, we will explore and identify challenges posed to new students. And whether or not you're teaching a 5th grade student or a retiree who's looking to check something off their bucket list, all beginners encounter challenges. Therefore, these 7 problems will relate to all developing saxophonists. Number 1, not having a professional sax sound in the ear. They say if you want to be an Albert Einstein, surround yourself around scientific geniuses. If you want to sound like John Coltrane, you should surround yourself with professional jazz saxophonists. Most people don't have the luxury to do either, but listening to recordings and creating the ideal sound in your ear and mind is possible. The problem for most beginners is that they don't use these listening experiences. The solution is to play quality saxophone music for your students and encourage them to be educated consumers of music. Developing skills that directly improve listening of a quality sax sound would be especially relevant in meeting this objective. Number 2, lack of saxophone embouchure. Many times, beginner saxophone students are looking to just create a sound on the instrument. Since creating a sound on the sax is done relatively easy, students just accept that it's adequate. This mindset also applies to the student's acceptance that by just blowing on the instrument and placing the right keys down, they will get the right pitch. And the pitch will be relatively correct. However, by not engaging the lower lip and requiring it to stand up, the embouchure will make mistakes. Correct vibrato technique will not be possible, and the player will have to blast to get some of the lower notes to speak out. Due to erroneous technique, a saxophonist's playing ability can be further compromised by environmental factors. Number 3, clothing catching sax keys. The saxophone has many moving keys that must work together to produce the ideal sound and pitch. Sometimes foreign and loose articles of clothing can catch the keys of the instrument and keep it from playing correctly. And the best way to avoid this from happening is to not wear loose-fitting clothes. Pretty simple, huh? Number 4, tonguing against the roof of the mouth. Beginning saxophone students sometimes fall into the trap of tonguing against the roof of their mouth. What you hear is a small explosive sound that occurs just prior to the pitch of the note being played. To avoid this, students should place their tongue on the reed and blow. Remember, the tongue does not have to smack the reed, but rather needs to touch it to stop the reed from vibrating and creating an articulation effect. Number 5, the strap is just not adjusted correctly. When the neck strap is not adjusted correctly, the student has to compensate. Often the student has to duck his or her head or has to lift the chin. Neither adjustment is an appropriate technique for getting a characteristic sound. It is important to remember that the weight of the instrument needs to be on the neck strap. Number 6, poor quality mouthpiece. Having a poor mouthpiece occurs more often than most people think. This can be due to wear and tear of hand-me-down instruments or poorly constructed stock mouthpieces. Take a moment to look at your student's mouthpiece where the reed comes into close contact. If the whole section is too flat, the reed may not have sufficient space to vibrate correctly. This can lead to speaking problems. Number 7, speaking problems. Instruments such as the saxophone are shaped in a conical form, and as a result, low notes generally have trouble speaking. If a student is having trouble with having their lower notes speak, check the following. First, see if the embouchure, in particular the lower lip, is activated. Second, if the embouchure is sound, then it might be a leak from the highest open hole. Tip: go ahead and try placing a small cork into the bell to help make the low note speak. That's it for today's episode. We love having you here, and if you found this episode insightful or you enjoyed it, please feel free to share it. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Music Educator podcast for the latest tips, tricks, and practical advice you can use tomorrow. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Please visit the Music Educator blog at www.forthemusiceducator.com for additional posts and music education news. As always, join in the discussion and let your voice be heard by providing feedback at www.forthemusiceducator@gmail.com or leave a Google voicemail at 703-942-9883. We will see you on the next episode of the Music Educator podcast. And remember, music can change the world.